Well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to be here this week with a very special guest, Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang, who has blessed us with her presence. And Ni-Cheng, welcome.
Having me.
Oh, our pleasure. I'd like to begin as we usually begin with a brief sitting. And this week is it's a week where we've been through a tremendous loss for our field, the loss of Thich Nhat Hanh. And it comes after the loss of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and we just had Martin Luther King Day last week. So these inspirational spiritual figures in our lives are worth remembering, and I think the best way we could remember them and honor them is within a silent sitting. So let's take a couple of minutes to sit in silence in whatever way is best for you right now, eyes open, eyes closed. And as you breathe in the inspiration of the breath, seeing if you can allow that breath of inspiration that Thich Nhat Hanh gave us, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Martin Luther King, and allow that inspiration to flow and fill the body, nurture the spirit. They're still with us. And as we begin to move out of this silence, seeing if that inspiration and their presence can be held in a way that continues throughout this session and always. And I'd like to invite Ni-Cheng to read a passage, if you choose to honor Thich Nhat Hanh, I believe.
This body is not me. I am not caught in this body. I am life without boundaries. I have never been born, and I shall never die. Look at the ocean and the sky filled with stars, manifestations of my wondrous true mind. Since before time I have been free. Birth and death are only doors through which we pass, sacred thresholds on our journey. Birth and death are just a game of hide and seek. So laugh with me, hold my hand. Let us say goodbye. Say goodbye to meet again soon. We meet today. We will meet again tomorrow. We will meet at the source at every moment. we meet each other in all forms of life.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that reading. And what book is that from?
That's from You Are Here.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, it's very serendipitous, I think, that you're with us this week. You hold so much in terms of all that you do for the field of mindfulness within your profession as a doctor. And just looking at your bio that you sent in, certain pieces stand out. So if I might introduce you as a mother of 2 children, I believe. What are their ages? What are your children's ages, Ni-Cheng?
Oh, they're 3 and age 12.
3 and 12. Okay, thank you. You're a cancer survivor. And maybe we'll hear a bit more of that. Of course, a mindfulness teacher, pulmonologist, international speaker on wellness and meditation and within your field as a doctor. You co-host the Mindful Healers podcast. We'd love to hear a bit more about that. And you founded the Mindful Healthcare Collective, which is a wonderful group that I'm a member of, and a group of doctors that is growing. So whatever we can do to, invite people in to continue that growth, I welcome that. And really interesting, you were named one of the 10 powerful women of the mindfulness movement in 2021 by Mindful Magazine. So you're prominent in so many ways in the field. And I feel, as I mentioned to you earlier, we could have several sessions together just to cover each one of these aspects of your life. I might also mention that I had the pleasure of working with you at the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness when you became the executive director after Steve Hickman left for a time. And I also know you as having a passion for paddleboarding. So I don't know what you call a paddleboarder, there's another name other than being a paddleboarder, but that seems to be quite a passion of yours that I see. So the question that I like to begin with is what inspired all of this? This session today has a lot to do with inspiration, from Thich Nhat Hanh to the inspiration of the breath, to the fact you're a pulmonologist, which is really interesting when we talk about the breath. But where did this begin for you? What inspired your path?
I think the inspiration for my path was one of necessity for survivorship. Being born and raised Buddhist, I hadn't developed a formal contemplative practice until I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was that catalyst of a very loud wake-up call where I was facing my own mortality that self-care became a necessity for me to continue to survive on this earth. And fortuitously, during Cancer Survivor Day at UCSD Cancer Center, when I was receiving most of my acute cancer care, I met Steve Hickman, the founding executive director of the UCSD Center for Mindfulness, and he spoke about mindfulness, and I knew about it because I was born and raised Buddhist and had dabbled in some meditations here and there. But it wasn't until that day of learning about the resources at UCSD that I became very interested in wanting to take classes and learn more about it, and then eventually teach it to my patients and to healthcare professionals to help prevent what I had gone through, to help prevent burnout, to help reduce the suffering of both my patients and healthcare professionals. So it came from a place of really necessity initially, and then it became a deeply ingrained interest that helps to feed my mind, body, and soul to this day.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. I think this is a path that so many of us take. It's as Joseph Campbell framed it, the archetype of the wounded healer in a way. You already were a healer and as a physician. And then you found mindfulness in a way that you brought it to your challenges with breast cancer. So speaking directly towards that, when you began practice as you were going through breast cancer, how did you find that it was a benefit? In what ways?
So, as a breast cancer survivor, mindfulness helped me acutely after chemotherapy. I knew that my scars were healing, I was done with chemo, but internally, from a mind and spirit perspective, I was still needing a lot of healing. And so with mindfulness, it helped to help ground myself in the present moment so that I wasn't spinning off into uncertainty. There's a proverbial umbilical cord that's present when we're in acute treatment. There's a known step after step after step of what comes next. But then once you're done with treatment, it's kind of like the doctors are like, okay, good luck. We'll see you in 3 or 6 months. And so I needed something to help me not catastrophize because I knew that that wouldn't serve. Knowing that the only moment I had was that day, that moment, not knowing if tomorrow, the next week, the next year would come. And so mindfulness was instrumental for me in getting through those initial first couple of years of that great uncertainty where cancer took up a huge proportion of my day-to-day consciousness. And then as I moved away from the end of treatment, and now I'm almost 11 years out, how cancer has taken up less space in my day-to-day consciousness.
Yeah. Has mindfulness taken up more space in the way you bring it into consciousness for your patients?
So for my patients like that I see in pulmonary clinic,
Yes.
so with bringing mindfulness into pulmonary practice, it's a natural connection because so many patients suffer from shortness of breath. And a lot of that is anxiety driven, and a lot of that is fear driven. And when I show them, especially some of the awareness of breath techniques, they feel empowered to be able to control their breath in a way and to notice their breath in a way where they can harness that physiology on their own to help bring the anxiety and fear spiral down. So in the moment during clinic, I'm able to lead them through like a 1 to 2 minute awareness of breath practices and take them through some different breathing exercises. And in the moment, they feel a difference. I haven't had one patient tell me that they felt otherwise. And for me, that's really powerful for them to feel like they're so out of control because of a diagnosis that seems like they're not able to control the prognosis of, to be able to harness the power to reduce some of the suffering from that diagnosis. And then some of my patients also end up taking mindfulness-based stress reduction class with me, and I don't have a clinically controlled trial to show this, but oftentimes the patients that ended up graduating from MBSR don't see me as often. They don't need me as much. And I like to think that it's because they've harnessed a practice that suits them and that has impacted their health, mind, body, and spirit in ways where they're not having COPD exacerbations, where they're not needing to use as many short-acting inhalers, as they're not having these attacks of their symptomatology. And of course, I'm still there for them as a support, but I do see anecdotally that, in a very, I suppose, biased way, that I think that they do get better in their own ways.
They're fortunate to have you as their doctor. What's most interesting to me is that, to kind of paraphrase the Rumi poem, you're bringing them to the anchor in their meditation of the breath, which is the paraphrase of having them look at the bandaged place, to look at the wound. And so much focus right now in our field is to bring people to anchors that in some way might not be trauma-inducing or activating. So there's kind of a sense I'm getting that, and I'll let you speak to it, that you feel it's advantageous for them to be focusing on the breath and finding a new relationship within what is creating their suffering, rather than taking them to a focus on a different place of the body or something else.
Rarely in MBSR classes, when patients focus on their breath, do they get more anxious. And I do offer alternative anchors of attention if that should happen. Also, greatly informed by David Trelevin's work in trauma sensitive mindfulness, to offer alternative anchors of attention, like the sensations of their hands, the sensations of their feet. And rather than focusing on the breath at the nostrils or something, noticing the actual physical changes that are happening when they're breathing. So the physical sensations of their rib cage moving up and down, for instance. So those are some of the additional kind of anchors of attention that are from a trauma sensitive lens.
Yeah. So in what way is this now moving into your work, as we're, in the pandemic, and you're a pulmonologist? I imagine that you're seeing a lot of patients who've been affected by COVID in one way or another. Are you able to?
There's a lot of...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just that I've been seeing a lot of mental health struggles amongst my patients. The isolation, the lack of social connection, which we know is one of the main pillars of health, has really been cut off. So they've been needing more creative ways to connect. And then also bringing in a self-compassion piece in that, reminding them that they're not alone in all of this. And so I think that a lot more of my clinic visits, rather than just talking about their pulmonary issues, there's a lot of mental health and checking in with their spirit and their mind as well, because that informs their physical health.
So more of an integrative approach to their whole well-being.
Yeah, rightfully so. I guess I'm using my integrative fellowship to good use in this time. I'll be finishing up integrative medicine fellowship at the end of this year.
Yeah. Right. And that's with Andrew Weil. In
Sorry,
Arizona,
Allan.
Ni-Cheng. Yeah.
Somehow.
I
Oh,
know
there
our
you are. Okay.
our connection's a little bit choppy, but your fellowship is in Arizona with Andrew Weil.
Yes. Yes, it's mostly a remote online fellowship, and then there's a couple of residential weeks that are scattered through the 2 years.
Yeah. What's that been like?
A residential fellowship is about a week long, and initially the first one that I attended was online, and then the most recent one we were able to hold in person, and that was just a wonderful experience to be in the company of like-minded clinicians and to experience some of these integrative approaches in the flesh with each other.
So, what would you most like people to know in terms of, because, we're all curious as to how to get through this continuing pandemic, and you're on the front lines, and you're taking this integrative medicine approach, and talking a little bit about this wave of mental health issues that's either here or going to continue to sweep over us. So, with a lot of curiosity that I have, and I would imagine speaking for everybody listening, to have somebody like yourself who is so involved in this, what would you like us most to know? What would be most helpful for us to know as we move forward?
That's hard because I feel like I could give like a whole lecture about COVID from the front lines. But I think that trusting in the science is really important. Self-care is also community care. So doing what you need to do to help optimize your pillars of health, like getting enough sleep, eating a healthy, nutritious diet, exercising, socially connecting, and doing something like mindfulness for stress reduction, all of those self-care aspects will help you take care of yourself better, which in turn helps the community around you. So like your loved ones that you live with, for instance, your friend circles, your coworkers, all of that has a ripple effect. Um, Kind of like how if you give yourself self-compassion, that compassion grows. And so from a COVID perspective, definitely not forgetting about your own health and well-being needs. And perhaps COVID is the catalyst that's needed to help all of humanity go inwards from a place of kindness and self-care so that we might be able to take care of others that need us.
That's so beautiful. A silver lining. So that leads me then to a couple of places. One is, for you personally, would you say that is where paddleboarding has been so nurturing?
Sorry, say that question again, Alan. I'm sorry, the connection
Sure,
is a little
I'd be
choppy.
glad to. I know. For you personally, is that where paddleboarding has been a nurturing grace to be able to get out onto the water and be in connection with nature?
Yeah, so paddleboarding and just being on the water. So I'm part of a dragon boat cancer survivor team. We're a group called the Team Survivor Sea Dragons, Team Survivor San Diego, and we're women, all cancer survivors, and we used to go out in dragon boats every week, and then we would compete, mostly West Coast, in dragon boat festivals. But since COVID happened, we haven't been able to practice as regularly, and we haven't been able to compete. But for me, even before I joined the team, I was introduced to paddleboarding by one of my dear friends, also a healthcare professional. And since then, I've been trying to get out on the water at least a couple times a month, not as much during the winter. But it has definitely been kind of a salve for my mind, body, and spirit in the exhaustion of the pandemic. Nature definitely helps recharge my batteries, and being out on the water is a supercharging situation for me. And the lessons that being out on the water and how that applies to mindfulness is also really poignant. Like I'll share one. Oftentimes when we paddle, we're gonna meet waves of different natures. Oftentimes it's the wake of boats or the natural waves of the ocean. And instead of trying to get away from or turning away from the wave, the way that you actually navigate the wave is by pointing your board or pointing your boat perpendicular to the wave. So literally you're facing directly into the wave, which is kind of counterintuitive. But when you do that, the wave rolls under you and you traverse the wave because you've met it head on. And I think that's like such a beautiful life metaphor. And it works in real life on the water.
And that leads me then to the silver lining question that you kind of brought up in me a moment ago, which is if indeed this is a benefit, COVID is a benefit in some way for us to move inward, then how might we best use that wave of what we're all going through to move ourselves into, I think, a productive place in the field, let's say where meditation might be recognized or mindfulness programs might be more recognized by insurance companies. What is your 40,000 foot view of the field for that or for the collective? What would you like to see if you could dream big?
So what would I like to sorry, Alan, you'll have to repeat it.
Oh, that's okay. It's how do you see what you alluded to before, which is that there might be a silver lining within us going through a pandemic of moving inward. You said this might be what humanity might need or benefit from. How might we be able to take that as a collective within the field of mindfulness programs and move forward for the greater good in some way, whether that is through insurance coverage or within your own work within the Mindful Healthcare Collective? What would your dream be for
I
moving
think
forward in the field?
in catching parts of that question, hopefully I'll answer it completely. Uh, in applying that kind of water wisdom into our own lives through the pandemic, and in our own mindfulness practice. Like, yes, of course, there are going to be waves that come up regardless of where we're at in life. Like, that is part and parcel part of life. But with our mindfulness practice, we've been given an opportunity to choose our response to it. And we know that one of the healthiest responses is to face that wave head on. But also knowing from a trauma sensitive perspective, because over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of trauma that's been sustained from patients, from healthcare professionals, from just the humanity at large. And so if facing that wave becomes too overwhelming or too exhausting, you can choose at that moment in time to not necessarily face that wave head on. Maybe you call in for supports, or you call in for some buoys that help with the balance of going through that wave, metaphorically and figuratively and literally speaking. But eventually, facing that wave in a way that is self-compassionate, whatever that looks like for you, is ultimately going to help you get through it, grow from that experience, and perhaps get closer to your authentic self and show up for yourself in a way that is true and authentic for you, so that you can move through the world with your own light, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Thank you. It starts at home. Okay, well, thank you, Ni-Cheng. I think with the time we have, we could check in and see if we have any questions for you from our Facebook viewers. And we'll save any questions from our community on Zoom, as I believe Ni-Cheng will be able to join us back on Zoom to answer those. So, Mark, if there's anything coming through from Facebook, I believe.
There's no questions. There's one comment from one of the Facebook participants. Love the face the wave head on analogy from your paddleboarding wisdom. That's from Simona.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's move then to another reading that I believe you have, Ni-Cheng, that you would like to offer.
Yeah, I had one more passage that I wanted to share from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, You Are Here.
Please.
I have arrived. I am home. In the here and in the now. I am solid. I am free. In the ultimate I dwell. In the ultimate I dwell.
Mm. Have you had to face the death of some of your patients and with their family members?
I've had to face many deaths over the last 2 years. I've lost a lot of patients, some related to COVID and some not. The interesting thing about the last 2 years is that, yeah, we have a global pandemic going on, but people are still dying of non-COVID related things. And it's been a reminder of just how life continues to go on, even if the pandemic is upon us. Like, that is life right now, and that life includes, unfortunately, a lot of facing of death. That's our reality, and all of us are doing the best that we can in the face of that.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced it from COVID and with other people close to us in our lives, and especially recently, and most recently with Thich Nhat Hanh, who is making the profound teaching very clear to us that we may physically die, but there's parts of us that remain. So, as Ni-Cheng has dropped off the call, we'll see if she comes back. Here she is. So what do you offer your patients, Ni-Cheng, your patients' families? How do you comfort them? Not everybody is going to take to the words of Thich Nhat Hanh or any particular thing. I mean, you have to meet them, I imagine, in the moment, but how does that happen? I can't imagine it if I had to face death that frequently with so many people.
In sitting with patients through their grieving processes, because not only have I lost my patients, but my patients have lost their loved ones. I don't necessarily guide them through a practice or anything like that. It's really just holding space for them and listening about their sorrows, their regrets, their sadness. And I get curious about it. So for me, it's more of a holding space for them and letting them communicate whatever it is that they want to communicate with me, so that that grief can come to the surface. So in a way, I try to hold a safe space for them to be vulnerable. And sometimes there's a lot of silence, and that's what they need. And during that silence, oftentimes there's a lot of tears that fall. So to answer your question about what I do for my patients, I think I simply hold space and not judge and not try to give advice about how to move through the grief better or how to take better care of themselves. Really, in that moment, it's about meeting their suffering with presence and knowing that I'm there, hearing them out and being there with them, even if it's just silence and crying.
Well, thank you for that insight and allowing for this space to be held today with you.
Thanks. It's been an honor despite the technical difficulties.
Well, that's part of the world we live in. And I think we made it through it okay and benefit from your teaching and your wisdom and your experience. So thank you for being here, Ni-Cheng. I will see you back on Zoom in just a little bit. And again, I just want to say how fortunate your patients are to have you. So thank you for being with us today. I feel that way for us.
Thank you. Thanks for all that you're doing and all of the teachers who are also bringing mindfulness to humanity.
Thank you. So I want to close by thanking Mark Foreman, who's been behind the scenes, making this possible, and Sing to the Mountain Studio. And if you feel this is a benefit, then I would invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell to be notified when these sessions are posted on the YouTube channel, which will happen sometime a little bit later in the week. Also, if you find these of benefit, then consider donating. All your donations are very supportive towards our continuing and being able to produce these, so they're very much appreciated. And next week, we are going to be here with Anitha Saravanan, who is a nurse practitioner, a nurse educator, and a nurse researcher. So we're going to get to hear a little bit more, most likely about COVID and all that Anitha is involved in from a nursing perspective. So with that, again, I want to thank Ni-Cheng and thank all of you who've joined us. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Ni-Cheng. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Facebook group, where you're also invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio so you don't miss out on future recordings of live sessions.